It's a few weeks after the funeral. The casseroles have stopped coming. The phone has stopped ringing. And a woman is sitting alone at her kitchen table, with a shoebox and a manila folder, and a stack of papers she doesn't fully understand. Her husband's discharge papers, some letters from the VA, a benefits statement with words on it she's never had to read before. She's 73 years old. She was married to that man for almost 50 years, and she is trying, through the fog of grief, to figure out how she's going to manage now, on her own, with what's left. And here is the part that breaks my heart, and the reason this matters. That woman at that table is very often entitled to benefits, real, substantial, monthly benefits that she has no idea exist. Money her husband earned. Money that is sitting there waiting to be claimed. That could mean the difference between just getting by and actually being okay. And nobody tells her. She doesn't know there's anything to apply for. And that earned support goes unclaimed, month after month, year after year. So today, this is for her. It's for every widow of a veteran, and for every son and daughter and friend who loves one and wants to help her. I'm going to walk you through the 5 things every veteran's widow should know about her benefits. The tax-free monthly check most don't know they can receive. The benefits she may qualify for even if her husband's death had nothing to do with his service. The change in the law a few years back that may mean she's owed money right now. The bundle of benefits that comes with her status, and exactly how to claim all of it, for free, without getting taken advantage of by the people who prey on grieving families. I want to say something clearly right at the start, because it matters. None of this is charity. Not $1 of it. This is not a handout, and there is nothing to feel uncertain about in claiming it. These benefits were earned by a man or woman who raised their right hand and served this country, and earned by the spouse who served right alongside them through the deployments, the moves, the long absences, the worry. This is deferred compensation. It is part of the deal that was made. Claiming it isn't taking something. It's receiving what was promised. I need every widow hearing this to hear that and believe it. Let me give you someone to follow through all of this. I'll call her Margaret and her husband Bill. They're not one specific couple. They're a stand-in for so many I could describe. Bill served in Vietnam, came home, worked 40 years and passed away last year. Margaret assumed that because he didn't die in a war, because he came home and lived a long life, there was nothing for her from his service. She was about to leave thousands of dollars a year on the table. Let's walk it through with her, and by the end, you'll know everything Margaret needed to know, and almost didn't find out. Let's start with number 1, and it's the big one, the cornerstone benefit that everything else orbits around. It's called Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, which is a mouthful, so everyone just calls it DIC. Picture Margaret sitting at the kitchen table with Bill's framed service photo nearby, a VA letter in one hand, and her daughter beside her trying to help sort the papers. Here's what you need to know about it in plain English. It is a tax-free, monthly check paid by the VA to the surviving spouse of a veteran whose death was connected to their service. Let me give you the number because it's substantial. In 2026, the base DIC rate for a surviving spouse is $1,690.36 a month, every month. And I want to emphasize 2 things about that number. First, it is completely tax-free, federal, state, and local. She never pays a penny of tax on it, and never even reports it. Second, it is not based on her income or her savings. It doesn't matter if she has money in the bank or a pension of her own. DIC is not means tested. If she qualifies, she gets it, period. That's over $20,000 a year, tax-free, for the rest of her life. Now the critical question is who qualifies, and this is where almost everybody gets it wrong, including Margaret. Most people believe DIC is only for spouses of service members who died in combat, or who died young, in uniform. And yes, those families qualify, but there are actually 3 paths into this benefit, and the third, one is the one nobody knows about. The first path, the veteran died in the line of duty on active service. The second path, the veteran died from a service-connected disability, meaning the illness or injury that took them was connected to their military service. So if a veteran was exposed to something in service, developed cancer from it decades later, and passed away, that death is service-connected, and the spouse qualifies through path number 2. But here's the third path, and I need you to really hear this one, because it's the one that would have cost Margaret everything. A surviving spouse can also qualify for DIC even if the veteran's death had nothing directly to do with their service, as long as the veteran was rated by the VA as totally disabled, 100%, from a service-connected condition, for a long enough stretch of time before they died. Specifically, rated totally disabled for at least 10 years right before death, or for at least 5 years from when they left the service, or just 1 year if the veteran was a former prisoner of war. Let me show you why that third path mattered so much for Margaret. Bill didn't die of his Vietnam-related condition. He died of a heart problem the doctors said was mostly just age. So Margaret assumed, reasonably logically, that she got nothing, because his service didn't kill him. But here's what she almost missed. For the last 12 years of his life, Bill had been rated 100% disabled by the VA for a condition connected to his time in Vietnam. 12 years at that total rating. Which means that even though his heart is what took him, Margaret qualified for DIC. That's $1,700 a month, tax-free for the rest of her life. She was one conversation away from never knowing. Think about how many Margarets are out there, and there's more that can be added on top of that base amount. Picture Margaret sitting with a Veterans Service officer at a county office while he checks boxes on the form for every add-on she may qualify for. If the veteran was rated totally disabled for at least 8 continuous years right before death, and the couple was married for those same 8 years, there's an additional $360.85 a month on top. If the surviving spouse herself needs help with daily activities, bathing, dressing, that kind of thing, there's an aid and attendance add-on of about $421 a month more. There are added amounts for dependent children and a transitional bump for the first 2 years if there are children under 18. These stack up. So while the base is $1,700 a month, a spouse's actual DIC can be quite a bit higher. One more thing on DIC that's genuinely important right now, because of a recent law. You may have heard of the PACT Act. It's a law from a few years back that dramatically expanded the list of conditions the VA presumes are connected to service, especially for veterans exposed to burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, to Agent Orange in Vietnam, and to radiation. What this means for widows is huge. Deaths that the VA would not have considered service-connected a few years ago may now qualify. And this is the key part. If a surviving spouse was denied DIC in the past, before this law, based on a condition that's now covered, she can reapply and in some cases collect benefits going all the way back to her original application. So if you were told no years ago, that no may not be the final answer anymore. That's worth a fresh look. And one gentle but important note on remarriage, because widows ask about this, and there's a lot of confusion. If a surviving spouse remarries after age 57, she keeps her DIC. It does not go away. That rule was changed to protect older widows, and a lot of people don't know it. Some women have stayed unmarried for years, giving up companionship they wanted because they wrongly believed remarrying would cost them this benefit. After 57, it won't. Now let's go to number 2, and this is for the widows who don't qualify for DIC, because not everyone will. Maybe the husband wasn't rated totally disabled. Maybe his death and his service just weren't connected in any way the VA recognizes. If that's the case, there is a second, completely separate benefit she may still qualify for, and it's one of the most underused benefits in the entire system. It's called the survivor's pension. Here's the difference, in plain terms. It's about how the veteran was hurt, or how they died. The survivor's pension is different. It's needs-based. It's for the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran who has limited income regardless of whether the death had anything to do with service. So if your husband served during a wartime period, and that covers an enormous number of veterans, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and money is tight, this may be your path even when DIC isn't. The way it works is the VA sets a maximum annual amount, they call it the maximum annual pension rate, and then pays you the difference between your countable income and that maximum. For 2026, that maximum for a surviving spouse with no dependents is about $11,700 a year. There's also a limit on net worth. Your assets and income combined have to be under about $163,000, and importantly, your home and your car don't count toward that. Now, here's the part that catches people, and it's why this benefit is so underused. A lot of widows take one look at their income, decide they make too much, and never apply. But they're missing something crucial. When the VA calculates your countable income, they subtract your out-of-pocket medical expenses. And for an older widow, those can be enormous, especially the cost of care. Picture Margaret visiting an assisted living facility, holding the monthly care bill while her adult son realizes those costs may actually help her qualify. If she's paying for in-home help or living in an assisted living facility, those costs come right off her countable income. So a woman whose income looks too high on paper can, after her care costs are subtracted, suddenly fall well under that limit and qualify for a meaningful monthly benefit. Do not disqualify yourself in your own head. Let the VA or a trained officer actually run the numbers. And this brings me to the single most overlooked benefit in this entire breakdown, a special addition to that pension called aid and attendance. If a surviving spouse needs help with the activities of daily living or is in assisted living or a nursing home, that aid and attendance boost raises the maximum pension to about $18,700 a year, roughly $1,550 a month, tax-free to help pay for that care. Let me say that again because families miss it constantly. If a veteran's widow is paying for assisted living or in-home care and has limited income, there may be over $1,000 a month available to help with exactly those bills, and the overwhelming majority of eligible people never claim it, simply because no one ever told them it exists. If you take one thing from this entire breakdown, and you're helping a widow who needs care, look into aid and attendance. It is life-changing, and it is sitting there unclaimed. One clarification so nobody gets confused. A widow can't collect both DIC and the survivor's pension at the same time. If she somehow qualifies for both, the VA pays whichever is higher, and that's almost always DIC. So think of it this way. DIC is the first path you try, and the survivor's pension is the second path, for those DIC doesn't cover. Number 3 is one that makes people genuinely angry when they learn about it. Angry that it was ever a problem, and relieved that it's finally fixed. And it has to do with military retirement pay. So stay with me, because if your husband retired from the military after 20 or more years, this could be worth an enormous amount of money. Here's the background. Picture Bill years earlier in a military retirement office, sitting beside Margaret as they choose survivor protection for her future. When a service member retires from the military, they're offered something called the Survivor Benefit Plan, or SBP. In simple terms, the retiree agrees to give up a small slice of their monthly retirement pay while they're alive, in exchange for a guarantee when they die their spouse will keep receiving a portion of that retirement pay, up to 55% of it, for the rest of the spouse's life. It's essentially an annuity, a survivor's pension from the Department of Defense, paid for out of the retiree's own pocket during their lifetime. Millions of military families have it. Now here's where it gets maddening. For decades, there was a cruel catch that people came to call the widow's tax. If a surviving spouse was entitled to both that SBP retirement annuity and the VA's DIC benefit we talked about earlier, the law forced a reduction. Her SBP was cut dollar for dollar by the amount of her DIC. So these two benefits, both earned, both paid into, essentially canceled each other out. A widow could lose more than $1,000 a month to this offset. Families paid into SBP for decades expecting it to be there, and then watched it get eaten away. Here is the good news, and it's the whole reason I put this on the list. That widow's tax is gone. Completely. It was phased out and, as of 2023, fully eliminated. Which means that today, a surviving spouse who is entitled to both benefits receives both, in full. The full SBP annuity, up to 55% of her husband's retirement pay, plus the full $1,700 a month DIC on top of it. No more offset, no more cancellation. So why does this still matter if it's already fixed? 2 reasons. First, because a lot of widows who were hit by this in the past still don't know the rules changed, and they've never gone back to make sure they're now receiving everything they're owed. And second, because SBP is not run by the VA, it's run by the Defense Department through an agency called DFAS. It is a completely separate claim, so a widow could file everything correctly with the VA and still have her SBP sitting untouched, because nobody told her it's a different phone call to a different agency. If your husband was a military retiree, that call to DFAS is essential, and it's separate from everything else. Now to number 4, and this is really a whole category, The bundle of benefits that come along with being a veteran's surviving spouse that have nothing to do with a monthly check, but that carry real, substantial dollar value. These get missed constantly because people are so focused on the cash benefit that they never ask what else comes with it. Let me run through the big ones. First, and maybe most valuable, healthcare, through a program called CHAMPVA. Picture Margaret at a doctor's office handing over her Medicare card and CHAMPVA paperwork, while the receptionist explains that a second layer of coverage can reduce what she owes. If a veteran died of a service-connected condition or was rated permanently and totally disabled, the surviving spouse may be eligible for CHAMPVA, which is comprehensive health insurance coverage from the VA. And here's what makes it so valuable for an older widow. It works alongside Medicare. Medicare, as we've talked about before, leaves real gaps, that 20% it doesn't cover, and things it won't touch at all. CHAMPVA can act as a second layer of coverage, picking up much of what Medicare leaves behind, often dramatically lowering her out-of-pocket medical costs. For a widow facing years of medical bills on a fixed income, this can be worth many thousands of dollars a year, and it's one of the most underused benefits there is. Second, education benefits. Now you might think, she's 70, what does she need with school benefits? But hear me out, because this is more flexible than people realize. Surviving spouses of veterans who died from a service-connected condition or who were permanently and totally disabled may be eligible for education benefits. Either the program called Chapter 35, which pays a monthly stipend of around $1,574 for up to 36 months of schooling or training, or, for post-9/11 deaths, the Fry Scholarship, which can pay full tuition plus a housing allowance. A widow can use these to finish a degree, learn a new skill, start the little business she always wanted to. And in some family situations, education benefits can flow to children. It's a resource that too often just expires, unused, because nobody thought to look. Third, the VA home loan. Picture Margaret walking through a smaller, easier-to-manage home near her daughter, with a real estate agent explaining how a VA-backed loan could help her move without a down payment. A surviving spouse of a veteran who died from a service-connected disability may be eligible for a VA home loan in her own name, which means the ability to buy a home with no down payment, no private mortgage insurance, and for surviving spouses, often with the VA funding fee completely waived. For a widow who wants to downsize, move closer to her children, or buy a more manageable place, that's an enormously powerful financial tool, and it's hers by right. Fourth, burial and memorial benefits. Picture a national cemetery on a clear afternoon, with Margaret standing beside Bill's grave while an American flag rests nearby, and her children stand with her. A veteran is entitled to burial in a national cemetery at no cost, and here's what many spouses don't know. That eligibility extends to them too. A surviving spouse can be buried alongside their veteran in a national cemetery, also at no cost, with the grave, the opening and closing, a government headstone, and perpetual care all provided. There are also burial allowances that can help reimburse funeral and plot costs, a burial flag, and a presidential memorial certificate. Some of these have time limits for filing, so they're worth asking about early. And fifth in this category, accrued benefits. This is a technical one, but it can matter. If the VA owed the veteran money at the time of his death, benefits that had been approved or were due but hadn't been paid yet, that money doesn't just vanish. The surviving spouse can often claim it. It's worth asking whether anything was owed and unpaid. So look at everything stacking up here for Margaret. The DIC check, $1,700 a month, tax-free, potentially her husband's SBP retirement annuity on top, with no offset, CHAMPVA cutting her medical bills, eligibility to buy a home with nothing down, a guaranteed dignified resting place beside her husband. None of that showed up in a single letter. She had to know to ask for each piece. That's exactly why this breakdown exists. Which brings us to number 5, the most practical one of all. How does she actually claim all of this? Because knowing these benefits exist does nothing if the paperwork never gets filed. And this is where two things matter enormously: moving quickly and getting the right kind of help. Let me give you both. First, on speed, there's a rule here that is worth real money, so please don't miss it. If a surviving spouse files her DIC claim within 1 year of the veteran's death, and it's approved, Her benefits are paid retroactively all the way back to the first day of the month in which she died. She gets every month. But if she files more than a year after the death, the effective date generally becomes the date the VA receives her claim, and all those months in between are simply gone. So the difference between filing in month 10 and filing in month 14 could be over a year of back pay, many thousands of dollars, lost forever. This is not a reason to panic in the middle of grief, but it is a reason not to let that folder sit on the table for 2 years. If you can't file right away, there's even something called an intent to file that can lock in your earlier date while you gather everything. Here's a piece of good news that makes it simpler. There's essentially one main form that does most of the heavy lifting. It's VA Form 2, 1P, 534EZ, and the beauty of it is that this single application covers DIC, the survivor's pension, and accrued benefits all at once. She fills out one form, and the VA evaluates her for all three and pays her whatever she's entitled to. She doesn't have to know in advance which path is hers. The form finds it. But now the most important practical thing I will tell you in this entire breakdown, and I want it to land. She should not do this alone, and she should never pay a stranger a fee to do it for her. Here's why. Picture Margaret sitting across from a county veterans service officer in a small government office, with Bill's service papers spread across the desk and a trained person walking her through the forms at no cost. There are people and organizations, call them veterans service organizations, whose entire job is to help veterans and their survivors file these claims, and they do it for free, completely free. The American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, the Disabled American Veterans, the DAV, and often the very best resource of all, your county or state veterans service officer, a trained professional whose whole job is to help local families navigate exactly this. These people know all the paths we talked about today. They know the add-ons Margaret would never have found. They know the PACT Act refiling rules. They fill out the forms with you, they submit them correctly, and they charge you absolutely nothing. You can also call the VA's Survivor Benefits line directly at 1-800-827-1000. Now the warning, and I want to be firm about this because it's where vulnerable widows get hurt. In recent years, a whole industry of what I'll call claim sharks has sprung up. Private companies that advertise heavily, promise to maximize your benefits, and then charge enormous fees, sometimes a percentage of your retroactive back pay, to file paperwork that an accredited officer would have filed for free. Some of them charge thousands of dollars for the exact same claim the DAV down the street would help you with at no cost. Please hear me, it is not permissible for someone to charge you to file your initial claim, and any accredited help is free. So if anyone, pressures a grieving widow to sign a contract, or asks for a cut of her benefits, or wants a fee up front to unlock what she's owed, that is the moment to stop, hang up, and call a real veterans service organization instead. The good help costs nothing. If someone's asking for money, that itself is the red flag. And let me add one benefit that lives just outside the VA system but should never be forgotten in the same breath: Social Security survivor benefits. Separately from everything we've discussed, a widow is very likely eligible for Social Security survivor benefits, based on her husband's earnings record, as early as age 60, or a larger amount at her full retirement age. And here's the good news. Her VA benefits, the DIC and the pension, do not reduce her Social Security at all. They're separate systems. So the complete picture for many widows is a Social Security survivor benefit and a VA benefit, side by side. When you sit down with that veteran service officer, ask them to help you make sure the Social Security side is handled too, and think carefully about the timing, because when she claims can change the amount. Let me gather all 5 back together, because I want this to be something you can hold on to, or pass along to someone who needs it. 1. DIC, the tax-free monthly check of about $1,700, and remember the third path, that she may qualify even if his death wasn't directly caused by his service, as long as he was rated totally disabled long enough beforehand. 2. If DIC doesn't apply, the needs-based survivor's pension, and especially aid in attendance, the overlooked benefit that can put over $1,000 a month toward the cost of her care. 3. The widow's tax is gone, so if he was a military retiree, she can now collect his SBP annuity and her DIC in full, with no offset, But remember, SBP is a separate call. To DFAS. 4. The bundle, CHAMPVA health coverage, that fills Medicare's gaps, education benefits, a no-down payment home loan, and a dignified burial beside her husband. And 5. File within a year to protect the back pay. Use one form to open every path. Get free help from an accredited veteran service officer. Never pay a stranger a fee. And don't forget Social Security survivor benefits on top. Now let me be honest and careful with you, the way I always try to be, because these rules are genuinely complicated and every family situation is different. Everything I've given you today is accurate as of 2026, but these numbers change every year with the cost of living, and the fine print of eligibility depends on the specific service record, the discharge status, the cause of death, and the income picture. Not every widow will qualify for every benefit on this list. Some will qualify for far more than they imagined. The only way to know your own answer is to sit down with someone who can look at your specific documents, and I've just told you how to find that person for free. Please don't take my word as the final ruling on your case. Take it as the reason to make the call. And while you're gathering those documents, this is also a good time to look at the rest of the financial picture, not just VA benefits, but any IRA, 401k, pension money, life insurance, savings, or retirement accounts that may now have to support one person on a different income. Because after a spouse passes, many widows suddenly have to make decisions about money they never expected to handle alone. And one thing I always believe is this: do not rush big financial decisions in grief. Slow down, learn your options, and protect what was built over a lifetime. For some families, part of that conversation is diversification, especially if a large portion of retirement savings is tied to paper assets like stocks, bonds, or traditional retirement accounts. That does not mean gold is magic. It does not mean moving everything around. And it does not mean making a decision because of fear. But some retirees and surviving spouses do choose to hold a portion of retirement savings in physical gold through a gold IRA because they want part of their nest egg outside the usual stock and bond system. So if you or someone you love has an old IRA, 401k, or inherited retirement account and wants to understand whether physical gold belongs anywhere in the plan, I'll leave a link below to a free gold IRA information guide. It explains how physical gold can be held inside a retirement account, how rollovers work, what the IRS rules are, and what questions to ask before moving any retirement money. Just click that link below. Fill in your details and you should receive the guide in your email within a few seconds. Now let's come back to Margaret at that kitchen table. With that folder she didn't understand, Margaret made one phone call to the county veterans service officer whose number a friend from church gave her. She was on the phone for maybe 40 minutes, and in that time, a kind man on the other end helped her understand that because Bill had been rated 100% disabled for those last 12 years, she qualified for DIC, $1,700 a month, tax-free, that she'd been certain she wasn't entitled to. He helped her file the form. He checked her for CHAMPVA. He made sure she knew about the burial benefit so that one day she'll rest beside Bill at no cost to her children. 40 minutes. And it changed the entire financial shape of the rest of her life. That's the whole point of this. Somewhere out there is a widow who thinks there's nothing for her, sitting with a folder she's afraid to open, certain that asking would be a bother or a handout. If that's you, or if that's someone you love, I hope this is the nudge. What's waiting for her isn't charity, and it isn't a favor. It's the last thing her husband earned for her, through his service, a way of taking care of her even now that he's gone. He would want her to have it. He set it up so she would. So make the call, open the folder, ask the questions, and let a good, free, accredited person help you claim every bit of what was earned. Because a benefit that goes unclaimed helps no one, and this one was meant from the very beginning for her.